Oh, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the November 5th, 2025 meeting of the Joint City County Planning Committee. And we'll first start with the roll call.
Chair Jacobs.
Here.
Vice Chair Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Caballero.
I know she texted me she's on her way, so.
Planning Commissioner Chagaris.
Here.
Commissioner Lee. Mayor Pro Tem Middleton. Commissioner Valentine.
Here.
Okay, and Chair Lee is also on his way, he said. So, okay. Are there any adjustments to the agenda this morning? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to announcements. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to recognize Grace Smith to just make a few staffing announcements to share with y'all. Good morning, Grace Smith with the Planning and Development Department. So good to see you all. We have some new staff members here today. Just want to call them up. John Sandor, if you'll come on up. John is our new AD over Development Infrastructure. John, if you'll just say a few things about yourself, because I don't want to get anything wrong.
Hey guys, I know some of you from my previous role with the state, specifically the NCDOT, came over here to the city of Durham, hoping to continue the trend of making things better. I enjoy that aspect, living here in Durham and continuing to contribute in whatever ways that I can. So found myself a little closer to the action, so to say. So that's it about me.
Awesome, welcome.
Thank you.
We'll put everyone on the spot here. Brianna Beadle was one of our interns that's working with us right now.
Hi, my name is Brianna. Like Grace said, I'm the intern right now. I'm currently a student at UNC Chapel Hill, a master's in public administration and city regional planning. Really excited to meet you all. And yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Fantastic, welcome.
And last but not least, Tessa McGuire.
Hi, my name is Tessa McGuire. I am the new Historic Preservation Planning Specialist, working with the Historic Preservation Commission. I come from a public history background. I used to work for state historic sites for a few years, so I'm super excited to be joining the Historic Preservation team and the community planning team.
Wow, fantastic. We love having all of the state talent coming here to Durham. Awesome.
Yeah, we like to snag people from all over. So yeah. So lastly, I just want to take a point of privilege, if you don't mind, to let everyone know that after about 31 years of working and almost 21 years here, I'm going to retire. So I'm out of here. December 31st. Yeah. So I'm here a little bit longer. Thank you. Thank you. It's, I will say, I think I'll just keep this brief, but I told Sarah when I came here in 2005, I was so scared. I was so worried because I was leaving a job where I really loved the people that I worked with. And I didn't really want to leave that job, but I just needed to go somewhere bigger so I could grow and do some other things. And so I came here and I walked into this department. I came from a department of like 5 people before. There were more people in this department than there were in City Hall where I used to work. And I was a director in a small town. So things were different for me. I had done a little bit of everything, but I had not done what Durham was doing. So I walked in and I was just like, oh, there's so many people here. And there were so many cubicles and so many people. And after the first 4 days, I knew I had found my home. It was just, everybody was so wonderful. And yeah, it's sad, bittersweet for me, but it's time. And I'm excited about this next chapter, even though I will be trying to keep up with my 85-year-old dad. That's going to be fun. He's a handful, but I'm looking forward to spending more time with him and my family. And just thank you all. It's been a great ride. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your many years of service to the planning department, but also to Durham City and County. We appreciate you and wish you the best.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
So I'll see you around there.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we joke that I'm going to bring her back part-time so she can clean up the file room. She's been threatening to do that for years.
That sounds good. All right, next we have, and I'm going to recognize that City Council Member Caballero is here.
Chair, can we also get an excused absence for Mayor Pro Tem Middleton?
Absolutely. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by City Council Member Baker, seconded by City Council Member Caballero. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion is unanimously approved. Okay, we have our minutes from October 1st, 2025. Any adjustments, revisions? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Moved by Councilmember Baker, second by Councilmember Caballero. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the October 1st minutes are approved. City and county managers' priority items.
None from the county.
Madam Chair, there's no.
Okay, well, thank you all so. Thank you so much. Okay. We now have an exciting item, the Durham Housing Initiative Task Force Report. And we have Aaron Kane to help with this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my help with this item is simply to introduce the person who's actually going to be giving the presentation. I'll turn it over to Ted Halbrin, who is a principal with Kelly Development and was the chair of the Land Use Subcommittee for the Housing Task Force Initiative. And with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Ted as soon as we get the AV working.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for making time for me to speak. I hope we'll obviously get the presentation rolling in a second, but I think this morning is meant to be as much of conversation as it is a presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we did for the last year as a part of the Housing Initiative Task Force, but some of the concepts that we'll talk about today, questions, discussion, feel free to stop me at any point. Great, thank you. A little bit of background about myself. There's some familiar faces here and some folks that have not had a chance to meet yet. I am an affordable housing developer only in every other community except for Durham. We build with the low-income housing tax credit. In Durham, we're under construction in Garner. We just built in Rocky Mount. We are under construction in Wilmington. And in most communities that we work in, there is not the political will to push developers to include affordable housing in rezonings. So we don't see it in our peer city here in the Triangle. I don't see it in Wilmington. I don't see it in many of these communities that we work in. And so in those communities, the only way to get projects done is to build with the low-income housing tax credit and get tax credits from the state and resources from, the city if they're available. What led me to be a part of the task force was we got involved in a project now almost 5 years ago in North Durham that was so big that it was never going to be just affordable. It required a ton of work with the community. It required a ton of work with staff. It required a ton of work with planning commission and council. Some of those folks were on planning commission and council at different points when the project came through. And it sort of served as this wild education in how to try to tie affordable into market rate projects in ways that can actually lead units to get built. And so the main purpose of the zoning subcommittee within the task force was to answer the question, how can we get more affordable units built without city subsidy, right? Without putting words in any elected officials' mouths, I'm sure will be a housing bond at some point in the future that voters get a chance to decide on, but there's not enough resources to fill the entire gap. And because Durham is Durham and incredibly unique and awesome in its willingness to push the development community for affordable, there are opportunities in the way that I think development work is processed in the city, and county. So with that, let's dig in. So number of recommendations were made. We'll start with the easier ones. I think there's gonna be a lot of head nods and consensus on these next couple, and then we'll get into the more complex and meaningful one at the end. Yeah, here we go. The simple off the top, first recommendation was if there are projects that are UDO compliant, trying to get them into the ground sooner rather than later is a good thing. Having spent a ton of time working projects with planning staff and other departments, there's great work that happens here at the city. But if there's an opportunity to find ways within reason, within budget realities to make approvals go faster, again, on projects that still get full vetting and still meet all of the requirements that any other project would otherwise receive, getting those projects to move faster would be a good thing. And so the recommendation was to find an outside third party that had done this kind of consulting work, that sort of had a good grasp on sort of best national practices, that understood North Carolina state law, which obviously is quirky and very unique, and try to come up and have a chance to understand sort of the resources and limitations that exist within the community here and with staff. So anyways, being respectful of all of the uniqueness that governs the approval process, how can we get it to move faster? Sean Egan was a part of our subcommittee. So I'm going to do a disservice talking through these slides to Sean because he knows this cold, and I'm sure you all have heard it from him repeatedly, but he's right. I'm thinking specifically in the context of the tax credit project that we hopefully will break ground on the next month here. It's up in North Durham. There's not currently a bus stop. We're working hard to work with transportation to have one added or come up with a plan for how one can be brought online when the project's already open. But it's severely limiting. We have 198 tax credit units. 51 of those will be Oxford Manor residents that move into our project. A number of those folks need transit. So Sean's big push was Durham has one of the best utilized transit systems in the state, and continuing to invest in it alongside of the affordable housing that gets built is necessary. You can't have one without the other. If we don't have enough people living by transit, then it's tough to get the pencil. If you don't have enough transit by where the housing is, then you limit who can live in that housing. So not anything rocket science-y there. I think everyone agrees there's just budget realities to how much money can be committed to it. We had the benefit of having Topher from Quorum on our subcommittee, who's great and knows ADU development cold and better than probably anyone in Durham. I do not build ADUs for a living, but there are a lot of great reasons why Durham continues to push ADUs in its code. And, you know, the program that I think, the pilot program that the city committed to recently to put funds towards Quorum's effort, all great. It's, you know, again, no one's disagreeing on the role that ADUs can play. There were a couple ideas that I would say Topher brought forward. I would absolutely not say that planning staff 10,000% agrees, and these are the things that need to get changed. These were things that Topher, in his very informed perspective as someone that lives in the ADU world, thought might make it easier for him to get a few more ADUs stood up. So again, leave these here for consideration, not as sort of final requests from planning to have incorporated into, say, like the new UDO. So before we get into the last and the big recommendation, I would say, I think it's important to have a bit of a level set on the amount of units that need to get built and a take on, and again, very rough numbers, but the sort of finances needed to accomplish all of the affordable development that's built, because it informs the need to get creative and find more ways of getting affordable built without city and county subsidy. These numbers are from a report from last year that was done by state HBA on a county by county basis across the state, looking at housing gaps that they projected would exist by 2029. So that was now a year ago. So this report's a touch stale. And 2029 is, in sort of development timeline terms, like yesterday. There's no project you're going to start today that's going to be open by 2027. These are the sort of rough round numbers that the report indicated represented gaps. The sort of low-income housing tax credit bucket is that middle one, and to some degree, the 50 to 80% AMI. The 50 to 80% AMI also includes sort of entry-level for sale product. And obviously everything below 30% AMI is the hardest product to build. It gets rolled into LIHTC deals at a small scale, and it requires a ton of gap funding. So rough numbers, if you're assuming $75K a door in subsidy, and that averages out 30% units which need more and 80% units which need less, and you just said, what is the size of the check that would have to be cut to build 12,000 units starting tomorrow, which obviously is not a realistic endeavor. But it's a huge number. It's never going to get bonded. And if, obviously there's a lot of serious people here in this room and elected officials that are not here that care deeply about solving this gap. And I think it requires a recognition that we can't spend our way out of it, that it requires some continued creativity and continued efforts pushing the market rate development community to bring more affordable forward. How we go about doing that is sort of the crux of the rest of the presentation. So we're going to get into what we're proposing in more detail to start at the end and then work our way to the beginning. The recommendation is to significantly strengthen the density bonus. The density bonus, incredibly well-intentioned. Like many other communities, it got brought forward and just didn't get used for a variety of reasons. I think the biggest one, at least here in Durham, from my experience, is that if you already have to go get a rezoning, why not just go pull a rezoning for the density that you need as opposed to rezoning for less, and then using the bonus subject to all the stipulations that are in it. Whether that's the reason or whether there are other reasons, I think the math pretty well evidences that it hasn't been used all that much. Again, starting at the end and working our way back to the beginning, the recommendation is that the city and county collectively work together to try to find ways of making more by right residential approvals as opposed to rezonings. And we'll get into why, but the crux is to give developers the leverage to buy land at prices that enable them to build more affordable housing. So to understand sort of why we thought this was important, I think it's worthwhile to have a conversation about what it's like trying to put a project together that eventually ends up at city, county 18 months later for a rezoning. I think everyone agrees with point one, or understands it at least, which is if you're incurring market rate costs of real estate and construction and capital, being able to offer the project at, say, rents below 60% AMI or sale prices below 80 does not work without subsidy. If it did, more of these units would get built. Durham can't tell Home Depot what a stick of wood costs, right? And interest rates are interest rates. But how the city goes about structuring its entitlement process impacts what land is worth. So, rough numbers, a piece of real estate zoned to include 2 market rate townhomes is worth less than a piece of real estate that is entitled for 4 market rate townhomes. And a piece of real estate that is entitled for 4 market rate townhomes is worth more than a piece of real estate that is zoned for 4 market rate townhomes and 1 affordable townhome. So including affordable housing decreases the value of a piece of real estate. But more density obviously increases it. And so the city, in the way it sets up its entitlement, when I say city, I also mean city and county. I don't want to discriminate, but if I keep doing that, someone's going to tear their hair out. The way the city goes about approving projects can lend itself to trying to find ways of compressing real estate valuations to enable folks to build more affordable. Everyone gets this, which is a project that ends up in front of council truly starts a year and a half plus earlier. A broker is retained and there's a bake-off, right? And the developer who plans on doing the least amount of either affordable housing or green space, or the things that detract from what would otherwise be the value of a project, is the one who wins the opportunity to bring the project forward, right? So if I'm the developer who says, well, I want to build 25% affordable housing as a part of this, 100-acre property, and a competing developer decides that they want to push a project with 4.5, obviously it's up to the seller to decide who they pick, but oftentimes they're going to pick the person who proposes the highest price. And so there is a weird, the projects that you see, the developers that are proposing the types of projects the city might be more interested in seeing didn't have a chance to put the land under contract. And then the timeline that it takes, even if you are under contract, at a number that makes sense with a project that passes muster, 18 months is a long time to figure out, to have certainty over, say, like what your interest rates are that you'll be able to borrow at, or like what construction costs are, right? And so what ends up happening is folks overbid for land. And so bizarrely enough, the biggest beneficiary from the last, at least in the 5 years that I've been in this community, aren't developers, it's landowners, right? The value of a vacant piece of real estate obviously is different depending on what part of the city and county you're in, but rough numbers, the reval from this year indicates that the value of a piece of real estate, a vacant piece of real estate in Durham has doubled. And we'll get into a real example of where we've seen that and experienced that. And then the last piece to this is that if there's a process created by which projects could exempt themselves from having to get rezonings in return for committing to the types of, whether it's affordable commitments or let's just say more broadly, density related commitments, green space, parks, et cetera, for projects that are willing to exempt themselves from a rezoning, avoiding a rezoning is incredibly valuable. They're super expensive. They're very time consuming, right? So I know that there is, expedited reviews for projects that commit to certain levels of affordable. That is helpful, but kind of window dressing. Avoiding a rezoning entirely is quite valuable. And we think a sufficient incentive for projects to try to program themselves to fit whatever the definition is that would allow them to exempt themselves. Because at the end of the day, again, if projects choose to exercise the density bonus as a means of moving forward, they avoid a rezoning. If not, they're welcome to come in front of council and plead their case. The bar for those approvals would likely be higher. So let's talk about a real life example. And this is a bit of candidly, a trust walk. This is a project that I'm involved in. We're going to do a little bit of storytelling and some candor about numbers and sort of ways in which having a density bonus that existed at the time this project moved forward could have proved incredibly valuable in the city getting a project that it wanted to see more than where this project is today. So this is a 40-acre site that got rezoned in fall of 2023 at the bottom of Fayetteville Road, which is just north of 751 South and a couple miles south of South Point Mall. In late 21, I was approached by a market rate apartment developer who was under contract for $15 million to buy this site and willing to, of that 15, commit 3 to subsidizing an affordable housing development out here that would be 50 units. The total density of the project, including the affordable, was rezoned for 490 units. The site's existing zoning was rural residential. So suffice to say, the site without the zoning was worth far less than it was with it, even with the affordable commitment that was made. The year plus long process unfolded. The site was successfully rezoned at a time when the market was turning. So rent stayed flat, rates went up, construction costs went up. A project that penciled no longer did. And so the market rate developer moved to drop the site. Well, the problem was that the zoning commitments made in this deal didn't include a timing mechanism for delivering the affordable. So if this deal got dropped and the seller decided that they wanted to, again, in a world in which you have a market rate entitlement and you aren't required to do the affordable, that site is worth more than it would be if you were required to do the affordable. So the challenge is, from my perspective, as someone that participated in the rezoning, if I didn't find a way to solve this, then my name would be attached to a site that committed to build affordable as a part of a rezoning effort, and then got dropped and got site plan to include affordable. It was never going to get built. And a market rate developer would have built the market rate part of the project, and the couple acres set aside for the affordable would have just collected dust, or the city would have had to gap fund at some point in the future. So we ended up taking, my group, ended up taking an assignment of the contract, worked to find a new buyer, and worked to renegotiate the price of the land with the seller. So in the former iteration of this, the seller was making $12 million. What ended up happening was the seller ended up making 10. The new market rate developer paid 11. So there's $1 million of gap funding that's been created, sitting in a bank account. It is not sufficient to gap fund a 50-unit low-income housing tax credit project out there. So I will be coming forward at some point in the next, 12, 18 plus months, whenever an RFP comes out, to seek gap funding to make the project tie out. So better than no affordable. We own the land at no basis, and there's $1 million sitting in a bank account to support the development of these units. Had there been a density bonus that this project was allowed to use, as opposed to seeking a rezoning that was structured in a stepping back for 1 second, because the entire market rate portion of this project was intended to be apartments, it is really, really difficult to tether the delivery of a LIHTC project with the delivery of a market rate project. Because if you are the market rate developer, you're going to take out a construction loan, you're going to put personal guarantees on tens, if not 9 figures worth of money. And if the affordable development does not happen, you'll be sitting there with a built project that you cannot pull COs on. So the structuring of the zoning condition was not intended to be slippery. It was intended to solve around what is a challenging problem. But regardless, if the developer who made the commitment drops the site, then the units may not come forward. So had there been a density bonus, the underlying seller would not have been able to sell the site unless the market rate developer knew that the affordable was going to pencil and work. So as the market compressed and rates stayed flat, or rent stayed flat and came down, and the value of the real estate decreased, the sale price that they would have been able to achieve should have decreased in kind, right? So a site that sells for 11 that needs 3 million in gap funding should have sold for 8. But the leverage wasn't there to enable me to push the seller hard enough to do that, which then now creates this gap. So hopefully, these are a lot of words, hopefully this is an illustration of the fact that on these larger projects, which take a long time to put together, and the value of this piece of real estate bumped around throughout that process, the use of a large, powerful density bonus as opposed to a rezoning creates the leverage for the developer to buy the real estate from the seller at a price that allows the affordable to pencil. So there's a $110 million apartment and rental townhome project that's moving forward. The market rate developer is a great group that worked well. The new group worked well with us to sort of allow us to find a way to make sure the site got bought. But they are making absolutely nowhere close to the, call it $10 million that the underlying seller is making. And so the question is do we have a process that is getting the results that we all want, which is we want to be able to see affordable get built alongside of market rate deals in every corner of the city and the county. And the largest impediment from my perspective right now is that the process does not give developers the leverage they need to buy land at prices that enables projects to include affordable and get built. So at its core, this vignette is intended to illustrate the degree to which taking more sites out of rezonings and pushing them through a density bonus type process and allowing folks to start site planning immediately puts developers in a position to bring more affordable forward than is the case now. We did not, redline the UDO draft to come up with exactly how this would be incorporated, but conceptually at 30,000 feet, the density bonus would need to be strong enough so that 100% residential projects could proceed without a rezoning. It would need to allow townhomes and multifamily units to be allowed by right on land that's currently zoned single family. And this is, the nuance, if this is a path that the city and county decide to take, is where do you strike the balance on how much affordable and that allows projects to move forward? If If the requirement is 20%, no one will use the bonus. If the requirement is 0, then that defeats the whole, if it's 1%, it defeats the whole purpose of doing this, right? And so in a world in which some portion of this is incorporated, it's going to require tinkering over a longer period of time to figure out sort of how much affordable, it's not even just affordable that could be put into this, right? It could be green space commitments. It could be anything else that a zoning process would would identify and sort of prompt in the form of a proffer. So, but the idea is that if developers know with certainty exactly what's going to be required of a project, you can price the real estate correctly, and not let sellers exist in this environment where there's uncertainty for 18 months, folks overbid for land, and then projects don't work. That is the presentation, not the bulk of it. That's the entire presentation. Happy to answer questions, happy to tell more long-winded stories about projects that are continue to, get worked towards affordable getting built. But yeah, thank you for the time this morning. And we, speaking on behalf of the subcommittee, genuinely enjoyed the process of engaging and thinking about crazy ideas to get more affordable built because, again, there's a lot of people in this room that care deeply about that. So,
First of all, thank you so much, Ted, for the presentation today, for being so engaged with this issue in our community, for being a part of the task force. I also want to acknowledge City Council Member Caballero for her leadership on this report. I hope everyone has a chance to really look through the entire report because we're only looking at one section today.
this is a tenth of what's in there.
Right. There's just so much. I've looked at it several times now. I also just want to highlight the dashboard that is part of this, which is on the chamber website. I looked at it again this morning and since I just came back from Portland, I was using the option to do comparisons with Durham and Portland. But there's also these incredible reports you can generate on a lot of topics. I think this is a separate conversation. Maybe I'd like to have at the end about what we need to do about the report. But anyway, getting back to your presentation, I just want to say that, the information you shared with us, we need to be having these conversations in our community. We need to be transparent. We need to educate our community about what is happening, the reality of what the real world is, and try to address some of the misinformation that frankly we have seen really a lot in this election that just happened. We're doing a disservice to our residents when we don't have these types of conversations and sharing information. We're really hurting our community. And so I hope that we will all work together in every way we can to bring everyone together and discuss the reality of what it is to do business in our community. So I'm going to open it up to questions and comments.
Thank you. Good morning, Ted. I just really want to thank the subcommittee. Aaron was on the subcommittee, Ted was on the subcommittee, Sean was on the subcommittee, and a few others. And they also, some of the subcommittees cross-met. And if you'll see, what I found really illuminating was regardless of the subcommittee, there were similar recommendations. So even the gap subsidy,
Yes.
which that's all they're doing is providing gap subsidy. They're not, quote, developers making money. These are the folks who are out there trying to build affordable housing. And when their recommendations line up with the land use recommendations and what we call the 80% and above, really thinking about workforce housing, right? I think it needs to be taken seriously. I think that we have to get beyond the narrative right now and just say we need to be a community that is pro-housing. That is my lens. I really want to thank Ted. His commitment to affordable housing is real and clear. I think that it is, I think it becomes very challenging to say that these folks don't care about affordability. So thank you for stepping up. Thank you for pushing on hard questions. There were certainly conversations on, well, how hard do you want us to push? What ideas do you want us to generate? And it's up to us who are policymakers to have those hard conversations and then communicate effectively and honestly and transparently with community around what does it mean to live in a community in a region that is one of the most quickly growing regions. And as a person who has traveled to cities where they are on the other side, they are in decline, they are losing population, I will pick our challenges any day of the week. So they are challenges, they are hard. I really appreciated that transit piece that you included because we knew that from the beginning, transit and housing have to be linked. So I look forward to the conversation. I know on council, we will be having subsequent conversations and I hope county commissioners will too, around what are the other pieces of the report. And that's all, thank you. I don't have any questions.
Yes, so I just wanted to say thank you for your commitment in this lane around affordable housing. I've had an opportunity to work with you in a different capacity in the past as a member of the Planning Commission. And so I know your heart is in the right place. And this is a very difficult issue for our community. The need is there. And I think it's incumbent upon us as policy makers to come together on what makes sense for our community. And so I look forward to having that conversation collectively and also on the county side. Thank you.
So I have some follow-up questions. I think this issue about the issue about by right housing, that we need to talk about that. Because one of the things that I've seen pushed out into our community is this idea that anything that is not being done by rezonings is bad. And there's been a lot of fear generated that I've seen in the community, this sense that everything has to be done by rezonings. And so I think we really need to talk about this. And I think that it would be really helpful to understand, especially, what the cost is. So one of the things that I want would be great to understand also, because you made a point that, so there's options to, which is, we're going to be talking about it in our next item. And these items, I mean, ironically, we're supposed to have this last month, but it's really good that it's this month because the next item is on density bonuses that we'll be talking about. And so trying to understand what is the benefit when things are done administratively, streamlining things, reducing the administrative costs. And then this being another approach, which is what do we gain when we have things that are done through without rezonings, and really understanding this issue of the cost of the land being one thing that we can really influence. And of course, we have other restrictions in the state. I just came back from this conference in Portland, Impact Transit and Community. And one of the things that I learned there is that from a friend who lives in Portland, who renovated a house, and he told me that certain developers in Portland been pre-qualified. This is just an example. They have been pre-qualified that if you use one of these, builders or developers, whatever, you don't have to have like the permitting and inspection process. It's just literally, he said, their builder met with somebody in the beginning, they did everything, and then at the end, that's it. It was so fast. So I think there are a lot of examples out there like that, but I guess it would be helpful if you could help us understand. I think the community really needs to understand the cost of rezonings and also the cost of the administrative process. I think for us to understand how much that adds to the cost of housing in our community. Is there a way that we can get that information?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the budget from a developer perspective for rezoning is relatively consistent regardless of the size of the project, which, informs some of the conversation about why SCAD was necessary, right? Like spending a couple $100,000 to push, a duplex through a rezoning doesn't make any sense. The projects that I've worked on are larger developments, call it 40 plus acres, where there's market rate and there's affordable. Between attorneys, civil engineers, surveyors, traffic engineers, at least on the front end, it's a couple $100,000. Also, in this category of costs that are incurred by a developer, when you put a piece of land under contract for at least 18 months, you're going to be required to put down deposits that at some point become non-refundable. And so the full total bill by the time you end up in front of council is a couple $100,000. Removing that is helpful on the margin. But, to use the example of the project on Fayetteville Road, if I save $300,000 by skipping a rezoning, that still doesn't solve the budget gap. So to me, the amount of money that gets spent, the challenge is that ends up getting weaponized against the developer if, say, no rezoning process that you go through is council pushing you to add components to projects that make it more valuable, right? And so everything that comes up as a proffer on zoning approval is going to reduce the value of the project. Well, your instinct as a developer is going to be to go back to your seller and say, well, the land's worth less because I need to add more affordable units. And the problem is that the seller, who knows that you've spent a small fortune to get that far and likely has some non-refundable deposits from you, has leverage to push back and say, well, tough, too bad, right? So to me, the amount of money that gets spent, at least from the developer perspective, the administrative burden I can't speak to, and obviously the city's well aware of what that looks like. But to me, so much of this comes back to the subsidy that is needed to build more affordable housing as a part of market rate projects. There needs to be a process in place that allows that to come from the cost of the land. If developments are paying less for land, there is more money to be spent on the kinds of components to projects that council wants to see. And so setting up a process that gives developers leverage to buy land correctly, to incorporate that stuff up front, and have that certainty, right? Like you can guess where you think council is going to be and how much affordable it's going to want, but it's 18 months out. And some group from Dallas who doesn't know Durham could show up and pay an extra $1 million for the real estate, not know what they're doing, and then they're the ones in front of you saying no or pushing back or, not producing the type of project that council would want to approve. So there's a long way of saying I think that the costs matter, but they matter just as much as leverage that gets used against developers to find purchase prices that make sense. And that is where the big dollars are. It's the cost of the real estate, more so than it is the cost of actually seeking the zoning approval.
So I guess what I hear you saying is that instead of city and county government, which we have very limited resources, and let me just say our experience with the county on the 300 and 500 East Main Street projects, I was absolutely hearing what you were saying. I mean, on our 500 East Main Street, we had the market rate being built first, and it's been very challenging to deliver both of those projects, and we've had to continue to go back and put in public money to make these projects work. And so I guess what I hear you saying is let's be able to deliver the same thing, but having the private developer do it and have it come through the price of the land. And I guess how would you see us doing up front what we know city council members would like to see from these projects? Like how would we structure that so that that's happening right at the beginning, not through the rezoning process? So we end up with the same outcome, but we're doing it at the front end.
So
right?
I think it's a both and. moving more projects out of a rezoning process and moving them through a density bonus will not, inch by inch across a 40-acre site, yield the exact same project that a rezoning process would, because rezonings are bespoke by nature, right? And someone could wake up tomorrow and be an important vote and decide they want something, and that might end up getting incorporated as necessary to get approval, right? The ask would be to see more of what council wants in projects in the UDO, so that folks know upfront exactly where the lines in the sand are. I definitely would not say that there is a process that would preclude the need for rezonings and simultaneously end up with the exact same work product that comes out of rezonings. Portions of it, absolutely certainty. But the push would be as much of what the city and county wants to see if it can end up in its development ordinances, so that folks program that into projects day one versus sort of finding out where that lies 18 months later. That's where this leverage on pricing sites correctly would come from. I also have the benefit of not having to be the person that writes the UDO, so it's easy for me to just say,
And we know
Having the
we
UDO.
know what the community wants because it's in the comprehensive land use plan. The community has told us what they want. And so that's what would be our job, is to make sure those things are in the UDO. Yes.
Thank you. I just want to chime in a little bit. I think the thing that we just have to have courage to do is to say, here are the rules. We have a comprehensive plan that is our North Star. We already know what the policies are. What are the rules? Make them predictable and understandable and in layperson terms, so that other community members, and that's what we're doing with the UDO, you know, regrouping it in a way that makes sense, using language that is more plain, so it's not as technical. And then just making that commitment. And instead of hiding the ball around, well, we said a thing, right? We're using politics to drive land use. And there's a lot of ugly politics in that. There's a lot of racism, classism. There's a lot of bad politics in land use in this country. And I don't think it's to our benefit. And I certainly don't think we can say that we are the city and county that we say we are if we're just going to continue that. And I think it's really challenging because in our society in general, the little person doesn't have a lot of power, right? And so it's counter. But I've been on this council for a long time. Depending on who shows up in the room is often how that goes. And to say that that is democratic or somehow better is just inaccurate, because whose voices often get heard? Homeowners with a lot of interest, neighborhoods who want protection, who don't want renters living near them, who don't want those kinds of people living near them. And we've seen it. We've heard it as council members. We've heard all kinds of nasty and coded language. And we have to have the courage to tell folks no. And that's what you say when you decide to run for office and take this seat. You have to be able to have the courage to tell folks no when they are wrong. And that is a hard thing to do, especially when it's your friends and neighbors. That's the plus and minus of being in local office. You're gonna run into people at your kid's soccer game or at Costco or at the coffee shop, and they're gonna be mad at you because they didn't like what you did. But that's the challenge. You said yes to that when you decided to step up in this space. So I really appreciate what you're saying. It's what I've asked staff, is there a way to do a report card of sorts? Whatever the value is, whatever we've already said, open space, affordability, tree save, whatever it is, if you make the points, you go forward. You don't have to come to a rezoning because you've already committed to the thing that we said, and we're not going to use the rezoning to relitigate and politicize something when we all have agreed through the comprehensive plan of what we want. And that's not why you're here today, but I'm just saying that as an elected official. And I think it's really important that we stand by the comprehensive plan that is very clear, that we put out in community and not use the UDO to relitigate. And that's something we've heard pretty consistently from other communities, that people will use the UDO rewrite to relitigate things that they don't like. And I think, especially when we said yes to the urban growth boundary, there are two ways to grow, out or in. And we chose in, and that means density everywhere.
Thank you, Councilmember Carrier. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make sure this is a productive conversation. I disagree with a lot that has been said and the way things have been framed. However, I do want to lift up a few, I think, really key concepts. One that you raised, which is sort of this expectation around land and the fact that landowners, one of the key problems that we're facing here is that landowners are benefiting handsomely by taking advantage of situations and speculating on their land and upselling. And then developers are on sort of on the back end, on their heels, trying to pick up the pieces and make the numbers work. And I think that's really, really important. And we do need to dig into that issue, is this issue of landowners taking advantage of speculation, sort of expectations, getting developers deep into a process where they've invested a whole bunch up front, and then they are so deep into those investments that they now lack the leverage to be able to implement better projects and more affordable housing. And I think that that's a really, really critical piece. I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I do think that that's something that we need to address and talk about. And I also think that another big piece here, and one that I agree with, is just a basic principle that we need to make things that we want to have happen easy and easier to happen, and things that we don't want to have happen, exclusionary housing, sprawl, low density, neighborhoods with nothing to get to or walk to, make that more difficult and make the things that we want easier. And so I think that there are a lot of different ways to get there, and that there is this balance, and infill, especially on smaller parcels, should be for the most part by right, especially on smaller parcels should be by right. And I think a lot of that's going to happen with the UDO rewrite and the comprehensive remapping. And I also think I really liked kind of this concept that you brought up around kind of these creative little mechanisms. You mentioned in Portland, kind of this registration of developers or whatever, who either kind of can expedite certain pieces. I also think that kind of thinking about like pre-approved prototypes, we've seen that with accessory dwelling units around the country, including in Raleigh. I would love to take that to the next level, kind of pre-approved prototypes for missing middle housing that can be implemented in neighborhoods. I mean, how many really cool, multifamily, small multifamily quadplexes do we have in many of our neighborhoods that we never see get built, that I think, frankly, would be major benefits in a lot of our neighborhoods. So I do think we need to have some good, productive conversations about both carrots and sticks in how we move in the right direction of creating a more dense, sustainable, walkable city that is and ultimately is built by private developers. So thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a add on to that, or sort of fit into I think you're drawing a distinction. What is challenging? And it's easy for me as a developer who works a couple projects over a few years to stand up and say, every site should be by right? Not every site is the same, right? There's different strategic reasons why different parcels should be getting different uses. The challenge is that if we say it's only the small lot stuff that should be by right, those projects, if we're going to build a couple duplexes, don't generate large numbers of affordable units. They might not even generate any. It's larger projects where there is enough market rate profit that's happening that can get recycled back into portions of a site where there is not money being made, that, at least from my perspective, and I don't speak on behalf of the subcommittee or the entire task force, but just boots on the ground, trying to find ways of getting large enough sites to have market rate, subsidized, affordable. The large sites, I think, are where more affordable can get generated. But again, so long as the leverage is there for developers to not be spending more money than the right project should be able to afford, if that makes sense. But I very much get like blanket buy rate zoning across the city, also leaves gaps as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And also by right is also confusing because we also are exploring these, I think, really creative opt-in options, I think, which is cool.
Yeah, correct. This is not intended to trip any inclusionary zoning wires. Right?
And this is unrelated to this specific conversation, but I do think that there's a lot of irony in the pushback from many developers against inclusionary zoning, mandatory inclusionary zoning, because I do think that we do a lot of dances to try and avoid that. It's a legal gray area, right? It's not like specifically enabled. It's not specifically prohibited. It's this legal gray area that we don't really want to play in. And in some ways, it could help like expedite a lot of different things if we did have this ability very specifically laid out to have mandatory inclusionary zoning, right? So anyway, just something that I think is interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we may go a little over on this, but I think this is a really important conversation. And I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Baker. I do want to ask you though to elaborate, because you said that you disagree with a lot of that's been said. And so I think that it's really important that you share here in this, as us as policymakers together, as members of the Joint City County Planning Committee, that you share right now what are the things that you disagree with everyone here, so that we can have a conversation about that. So
sure. Yeah, no, I think that we have a lot of opportunities to make a lot of things by right. I also think that we need to make sure that we hold on to some discretionary opportunities across our city, particularly on kind of these major sites. I also think that increasing density by right, which we've had this conversation before as well, without including kind of these opt-in options or including voluntary, well-written voluntary density bonuses. I think that would be a major giveaway and mistake. I also think that they would apply differently across our city. So I think that wealthy neighborhoods wouldn't feel the same impact, even if we kind of treated all neighborhoods the same. I think that we would end up seeing major changes and increased displacement in kind of the lower income neighborhoods. And that we just need to be intentional about avoiding major gentrification and displacement issues to the extent that we, have some leverage over that. So I think that those are really important things for us to do.
Okay. Yes, and then I'm going to ask Sarah to respond to kind of what the concerns raised by Councilmember Baker. Yes.
I just have a follow-up question. I mean, my understanding is a lot of this conversation that is about greenfield development. So it's not about established neighborhoods, which is what you're raising, Councilmember Baker, that the pressure is on the spaces that are the land that is available, these larger sites, these multi-acre sites, that isn't going to be infill. So that's where we're going to see, and that historically is where we are seeing some of these, the Bragtown development. We've had a few now. Yes, it's in city limits or it's getting annexed, but it's not core, it's greenfield development. So I just am curious about what displacement you're referencing, because all of these kinds of projects are hundreds of units versus smaller, kind of what I hear your concern being.
So the question is, what's the question?
Okay, there we go. You're raising a concern around gentrification and displacement, and I'm saying that the mechanism or the conversation we're having today is around development that is often greenfield development, which is not infill, which is not where neighborhoods are. So you're saying that something like this could impact poor neighborhoods and wealthier neighborhoods, but that's established residential. This is really, I think, trying to tackle greenfield development. So it wouldn't be established neighborhoods.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I wasn't aware that we were only talking about large greenfield sites. Sure, I think that there are some interesting things that have been raised. I would want to learn more about this issue. Annexations tied to these things, how we make sure that we are paying close attention to key infrastructure and services. I mean, there's just so many more issues that are involved with greenfield, because you are literally expanding a city outward. You're constructing a neighborhood, but you're also constructing outward the city itself. So sure, I'd be interested in learning more about what that does look like.
As a developer who's annexed and needed to solve infrastructure, Bragtown's a perfect example of just a massive infrastructure endeavor. We go through a pretty comprehensive vetting of that infrastructure, the traffic, utilities, et cetera, as a part of the site plan and the CD process. Obviously, there's nuance in every conversation. No doubt some of that stuff may benefit from having a conversation as a part of a zoning effort. But I think there is a mechanism in place to make sure that projects aren't just like not building traffic signals because they got access to a density bonus that precluded them from having to rezone, right? There's still an opportunity to, run traffic during a site planning process and have NCDOT weigh in. So again, it's so difficult because this conversation is sort of at 30,000 feet as opposed to site specific. But yeah, from my perspective, there are ways of making sure that's vetted sufficiently, not as a part of a rezoning.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm glad. I love the work that we've sat in church basement before with community folks talking about this work. The rezoning before you was rejected to get to you to provide a really great project out there, and I'm glad you're working out there.
I will say, as it relates to the Bragtown project, right? So that initial rezoning was in 2019. It's 2025 today. We hope to break ground on the 198 units of affordable in a month. Hope to see you at the groundbreaking. We won't deliver these units until like late 27, best case. It'll take 12 months to lease up. So really we'll be filling these units by like middle of 28. So that's 9 years. And I think it's a perfect illustration of this question, which is if there was a density bonus that would have enabled, and let's just pick up the affordable housing in the Bragtown project ended up representing 20 to 25% of the units. It's a massive percentage. On the same side, the city's putting $10 million into that project, right? And the seller made money selling the site. Good money selling the site. Couldn't be more thankful that the support the city's provided to make that project happen. It doesn't happen without the city. I'm not a miracle worker. Numbers have to pencil. But the sort of core crux of the question is, would that project, if it had to build 10% of the units as affordable, and it had to be funded by the market rate developer, and they could have started site planning in 2019 and stuck a shovel in the ground in late 2020, and we had people living in 600 units, of which 60 would have been affordable. I'm not saying, again, there's a right and a wrong, but that is the core of the question, which is, sometimes we spend a lot of time planning, we get a great project, and it also takes 10 years to get built and financed, and the city participates heavily in the process. So that to me is sort of this, and again, there's not one single right answer here, but that is sort of what we were thinking about and grappled with as a part of the subcommittee work.
Thank you again for the very real world examples of what this means. And I really hope that we will, moving forward, have more of these conversations where we're not just being theoretical, we are getting people together and sitting down. I think our community really needs to be able to meet with people like you and, understand what the realities, the economic realities are, and what the impact is and what the choices are. And I would just like to hear from Sarah with the UDO revision process. And we're going to talk about this in the next item, what the opportunities we are going to have to implement the comprehensive land use plan, which is the voice of our community. What are the opportunities we're going to have to really implement some of the things that we're all taught, that we all really want, and also to address what I'm trying to also shine a light on, which is this whole issue that I've seen in this election around the fear that the UDO is just going to be a blank check for developers, that there's going to be no more rezonings, that developers going to be able to do whatever they want. Can you please speak to that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'll start with that point first, because I just went through our case files while we were sitting here just to pull some numbers out. It's important to note that projects to build at any sort of density, if they are not in the city, will need to be annexed, right? And so that is a legislative process. Those come, whether or not the zoning changes, it's still an initial zoning that has to go before council. So to build at any density, those greenfield projects, which is I think maybe what you were alluding to, Councilor Caballero, will need to go to council. So I wanted to look at, okay, so what proportion of cases is that today, to give us a sense of like what we might expect, right? So these are calendar year numbers, and they may be off by, a case or two, because I literally just went in our files and counted, okay? But in 2025, so far we have had 39 zoning cases submitted. 28 of those required annexation. So the vast majority of those. Last year, there were 47 cases total submitted. 20 of them required annexation. The year before, so 2023, and I stopped there, we had 53 cases, 35 of those required annexation. So the vast majority of cases we're seeing require annexation. I don't see that trend changing, right? Because in order to build on these greenfield sites at any density, you're going to have to be annexed. So I think the fear that people have that council will no longer see any more cases is just, it's misinformation. I don't think that is correct. So I just wanted to kind of set the record straight there that there will absolutely still be rezonings. There will absolutely still be decisions for council to make in the land use space. In terms, I think another thing that's been brought up that is a really good discussion point that is one of the main ways that I think you all need to help inform the UDO is we are trying to implement the comprehensive plan and the place type map. But the place type map, the place types are not necessarily a one-to-one to the zoning districts, right? There are always multiple, in most cases, there's multiple districts that can be used in a place type. And so staff has been going through the exercise, and we've shared with you in the past some of our logic for mapping and how we have recommended that certain things be mapped when there was a change that needed to happen to align with a place type map. But there are still places where, a decision needs to be made whether something should be a slightly higher district or a lower district to incentivize either using, one of the opt-in options, or even just whether that, going to a slightly lower district, a CX5 instead of a CX8, for instance, and, if someone really wants to, then they could get a rezoning. Like those fine decision points still need to be worked out, and we're still looking for input on like just calibrating the map correctly. So I think that is a critical thing that we're going to be continuing to seek y'all's guidance on. But for council members, you are still going to be in the rezoning and annexation space for sure, because there's still a lot of land inside the UGB that is unincorporated.
Thank you. I really appreciate, I want to say it loud and clear for our community that the UDO rewrite will not be a blank check to developers. There will be plenty of rezonings, and for large projects, they will continue to be rezoning. So, except if we do come up with a way to incentivize affordable housing and other benefits that we want to see from the UDO, like access to walkable communities, green spaces, all the things that are the priorities of the access to transit. If we can figure out a way that will make it so that we get those things on the front end, that's something for us to look at. And I just also want to highlight everything we're talking about today. To me, what's screaming out at me is the land that the city and the county and the schools control. That is where we could really try some of these approaches, the land that we control. To your point about it, that's where we can make a difference is with the land. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to do that. Did you want to say something?
Yes, so, Madam Chair, I actually agree with that. So we have the ability of the land that the city and county possesses to make that happen. But I also want to go on record, and this is probably not something that's foreign to you with respect to the annexations. I believe that the way we're handling annexations right now doesn't give voice to many of our residents who live in the county. And so, I mean, as the policymakers, we're the ones to decide, but I think engagement around these projects, which is why I'm for administrative processes. It's the last guardrail for our residents to be heard, and then we decide. And so I think that's important. And we've had a decision. I mean, we've had a conversation about by right zoning. I think conceptually that makes sense based on the size and the scope of the project. But I think on the one hand, our administrative procedures, and then on the other, the by right zoning, it's going to be incumbent upon us to come up with, I think what will be a compromise between both of those sort of concepts moving forward. And I think we can do that. Yes.
Okay,
And Madam Chair, I have to leave at this particular moment.
Well, we'll miss you for the next item.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other comments before we move on? Yes.
I have a question on section 4.5, page 15 of 74 of the report. It says assess the comprehensive plan to potentially identify expanding areas for sensitive housing development. What is sensitive? Is it a sensitive house, or are we putting houses in an environmentally sensitive area?
I'm gonna have to circle back with you on that. I do not know the report page by page, and there might be a section that you're referencing. Do you know what subcommittee it falls under?
Section 4.5, it is under the land, no, not the land use subcommittee, workforce housing subcommittee.
So I unfortunately had nothing to do with what was written there.
Okay.
And I'm sure Dan Jewell, who is closely connected to that effort, would be happy to come spend some time with you guys. But yeah, sorry to not have the answer
All
for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you again so much,
Yeah,
Ted, and glad to have you as a partner in our community. Are you sticking around for the next item or are you leaving?
I'll stick around, but
Okay.
just to close, I thank you, honestly, again, but we do work in a bunch of different communities. Durham gives a hoot. Other communities not at this level. There's a disagreement on sort of how that hoot manifests itself, obviously. But it's cool to be a part of communities that care. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, appreciate the conversation. Moving on to the new UDO infill development with Robin Schultz.
Anytime I look nice, I get made fun of. All right, Bo Dobrinsky, Plan Development Department. Robin Schultz and I are going to present this item to you on infill development and sort of related to proposed new UDO standards. So, first thing we'll talk about will be the affordability and compact percentages. These are for the opt-in options that Councilmember Baker alluded to earlier. We will also discuss infill standards that we'll be carrying forward. And then the third item will be a sustainability development matrix for projects required to meet. So as you all have seen, the new UDO proposes an opt-in set of regulations for developments that include either compact units or a percentage of affordable units. This here is a model that we've shown to you all. We have different versions of this. In the RD district, this is being proposed to be applied in the established residential place type. Consistent with the comprehensive plan, there is an acknowledgement or an acceptance that there will be some amount of duplexes or townhomes or smaller apartments to be constructed in this place type. This is both because the current, many of our current existing neighborhoods have this mixed housing types, and of course we want to encourage this along existing infrastructure and as a part of building in and further densifying. You'll see here if the development chooses the compact option, which is very similar to the small house, small lot option in today's UDO, which applies in our urban tier. You can construct up to 1 unit per 1,250 square feet of lot area, as long as you commit to a structure 1,200 units or less, or a unit size 1,200 or less. The idea here, of course, being that by requiring smaller units, typically rent or home prices are at a per square foot level. So this would sort of deflate the cost of these housing units, which we have seen that flesh out in the small lot, small house option in the urban tier. So we're essentially expanding a version of that throughout the RD district. One thing to keep in mind when looking at this option and also that third option that I'm about to talk about, the structures themselves or the massing could vary. These are just two examples of how they could be developed. So there is some flexibility in terms of, it wouldn't have to be those 4, it could be 2 duplexes, and it wouldn't have to be 2 units of 4, it could be, 2 units of 3 or some flexibility there. Talk a little bit about the third option if they choose the affordable opt-in. This would be 1 unit per 625 square feet of lot area. So on a typical 5,000 square foot lot, which is what we see, or which is most common in our urban areas in RE5, and would be the base lot size in the RD. This would allow up to 8 units in that opt-in option. Here's just showing one example in all of our mixed-use districts. We would allow a similar set of opt-in standards. This is RX5. You'll see here, if you opt in with compact, smaller units, 425 square feet, will allow additional height. And of course, if you choose the affordable option, we would lift the height restriction entirely. This, of course, gets at both allowing further density, which is something that is decided we want in the comprehensive plan, as well as getting those affordable or smaller units to get at a mix of price points. A little bit of research here just to provide some background and actually some additional context to the conversation earlier. We've gone through and looked at the proffers that have been provided for income restricted housing and approved by council during the last 5 years. We did not go through, obviously, as you all are aware, these include sometimes 80% AMI, sometimes it's 60% AMI, sometimes it's 20 years or 30 years. There's a lot of variation there. So this doesn't get into all of those particular variables. This also, does not include existing structures that converted. For example, like some of the hotel conversions that provided some percentage of income restricted units, simply because that's a pretty unique in terms of, like Ted was talking about, in terms of making the money, the numbers work. It's a completely different set of calculus when you have an existing structure and existing units that you're just refurbishing. And so we remove those from this math. You'll see that the average proffer for income restricted units is roughly 5.7%. And then also one other thing just to note is for this number and when we talk about affordable density bonuses that have been used, we typically are removing projects that have public subsidy that are 100% affordable. Those projects would have moved forward anyway, right? The funding mechanism there is, we're not using a carrot in that instance to get those affordable units. Any questions here before I kind of get into the details of the? So talk a little bit about the details of these opt-in development standards and how we've got this proposed. The first thing I want to say to you all is we're here to get direction from you, right? Like this is the opportunity for us to receive feedback from you all to make sure that that's incorporated in the proposed UDO. And the second thing that I'll note is because every property is different and the values of all the properties are all different. Obviously, we had a big discussion the last hour about all of those variables. There's not really a perfect science, right, in terms of hitting a particular number, right, that would be, just enough incentive while providing just the maximum amount of units that we could see from a development. So just, we acknowledge that. One thing we do know is we would like to, in these instances, because this would be by right development, we would like to see more affordable units, right? Like, so if we're getting 5.69 now, we'd like to see an increase from that. We know that our current affordable density bonus is at 15%. We've had that for longer than some people in this room have been alive, and we have seen 8 units approved. Our slide here shows 0 units that have been CO'd. We've actually got 5, I just found out recently, so that's good news, but it's also kind of sad because it's only 5. And so one thing we know is that 15% is probably not high enough, or I'm sorry, it's probably too high, and we know that we'd like to reduce that to actually see this number used. Also, to harken back to a presentation that Scott had put together earlier this year, when looking at some of the other jurisdictions, the ones that had used more had lower, or the ones that were producing more units had lower percentages that were required. So what we're proposing here is in the RD, the option you'd provide 8% of the units at 80% AMI or less, or you could provide a deeper affordability at 30% AMI or less and have 4% of those units in order to exercise that affordable option.
One second, Councilmember Caballero.
I wanted to say that what we heard in Minneapolis last year was that 8% kind of is almost the sweet spot where they can actually get production.
Yeah, I will absolutely admit to hearing them loud and clear. So in Minnesota, or in Minneapolis, they've got inclusionary zoning, and if you provide a certain number of units, they're requiring that 8% and 4%. That's very similar to what's being proposed here. We are not applying that minimum requirement because, of course, this is an opt-in option. This is up to the development or the applicant to choose. But absolutely, in Minneapolis, it was both from the studies that they had put together and in terms of how it they had seen it play out was sort of the sweet spot in terms of not stifling development while also getting the affordable units throughout their community. So yeah, similar model. The one difference here, because we'll allow this option in the RD, which does have some of these infill situations, right? So if you've got one 5,000 square foot lot, theoretically you could come in and you would propose to densify and see that, you know, the slide that we've shown several times with multiple units, well, one of those units would be affordable. And certainly we would love to see, and just admittedly, maybe more than one, but right now we're seeing 0. And so by giving that ability, there one distinction from Minneapolis, of course, is seeing that at that smaller scale. And then I'll stay with the affordable option. We can talk compact afterwards. For the RX and CX districts, which are typically apartments and rental, obviously they don't have to be, but this would be 8% at 60% AMI. This is more in line with what we've seen proffered with rental developments. And then, of course, still the deeper affordability with 4% at 30 AMI.
One quick question. Are those percentages applying above the existing base height, or would that be throughout the entire building?
It would be throughout the whole building, so of the overall. And of course, we have sort of internally talked about, in some of these instances, especially with the in our TOAs, right? Like in those areas, we want to see this great density anyway. And so there's a little bit of acknowledgement that the applicant is providing those units and getting the additional height, right? In some instances unlimited, in other instances it's just slight increase, 3 to 5, 5 to 8 for the compact. What we're getting, or what we're seeing in those instances, is density where we want it to be, and so that's a little bit more precise. So
if it's in these districts and it's non-residential, is there like a fee in lieu or something, or is it just not applicable?
Currently, there is not an option for them to, which we are open to some feedback from you all on that, because essentially what we're saying is, in order to build that maximum height, you have to give us those affordable units. Otherwise, there are those caps for the non-residential developments, sold non-residential. And that is, again, something we've talked about a lot, but really just looking back at the comprehensive plan in terms of ways to further encourage those types of units. Any other questions on, again, this is, we acknowledge that there's, it's a bit of a balance, right? Like we could probably increase that number, but then see it used less, and we could, decrease the number, but then we may be giving more favorable development regulations when it wouldn't be appropriate. So any direction from you all, or any agreement or disagreement, we'd love to hear that.
My question is, have this been discussed with affordable housing developers to get their input onto what would be financially, work? Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to be successful.
Yeah.
Making it happen based on the fact that our incentives in the past have not worked financially. So has there been like pulling together like some local affordable housing developers?
Commissioner Jacobs, I'd welcome Ted to speak if you want to come back over. But one thing I want to just stress is these incentives and these bonus programs, right? Like in that instance, we are trying to attract developers that are not affordable housing developers to provide those units and to get into that space. Or obviously partner with others that are. I think that the affordable housing development community is not necessarily going to be interested in this, because that's their mission anyway, whereas we were actually aiming for others. And we have thrown these numbers out in front of various developers in the development community, just sort of letting them know that this is what was proposed. One thing that, and again, I don't want to repeat the same presentation, did not hear any, yay or nay to particular numbers, or, and I imagine that they're not going to say, because there's such varying conditions, right? The initial land price being a big one. But to go back to the conversation about this being by right and predictable, they have all confirmed that they can go higher than 5.6% if they know it will be a yes when they submit the plans. So that's part of the justification.
And then in terms of the affordable option, would that be regulated like the city normally does with tracking?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. And it would be like 30-year.
Yeah, the way we've currently proposing it is similar to the affordable density bonus that's in today's UDO with 30 years
Okay.
being the tenure.
Okay.
I just want to say, I love this table and this conversation to start with. And I really I haven't seen many zoning districts that do have the opt-in options. And I think that that's really cool. I'm not a huge fan right now of the compact, the entire concept of compact. I really like the affordable. And I almost love something to the right of affordable that's, like a nonprofit developer that's using LIHTC that is 100% affordable. So that's where I'm at right now. And I can't give you specifics, but I'm just kind of playing with that idea of, I'm a huge fan of this affordable column. And I would also be interested in kind of like, how do we make it so that it is a huge incentive for LIHTC and other kinds of, 100% or almost 100% affordable developments.
I will say that the incentives currently, I think for the way that it's structured, right, with these three, is already fairly favorable for those. And so I think the way to do what you're describing would be to pull back on the incentive for the current affordable option. And of course, then the concern would be how often would it be used or not. So I think that we've tried to get it, what you're saying, right, for all the LIHTC. And like today, our affordable housing density bonus, we have hundreds of units that have been used from LIHTC projects that are 100% affordable. And so they're already using that. And so I think our assumption was they would be very happy with this opt-in situation already.
Okay, I appreciate that. I want to come back to this idea, and I don't think this needs to happen in the UDO rewrite, but I would love for us to explore this, the pre-approved prototypes for missing middle housing at some point in the near future. And again, I don't think, but if that is, because I've seen a lot of these programs for ADUs in other places. I haven't seen a lot of them for missing middle housing. So are you aware?
Yeah, so I did a bit of research on the ADU program in Raleigh. One of the things that I learned there was that's the majority of them are not used off the shelf. People want to customize and they want to change them anyway. So that program hasn't panned out the way they thought it would. I think that for a larger like missing middle program, I haven't heard of one of those. I think that the challenges would be a little bit bigger because when you increase the footprint of a building, right, and this is the former architect in me talking, and getting it on the site, and there's just a lot more design that has to go into it, even if you're pulling off the shelf plans. So I think any benefit there would be nominal at best.
So you don't see that, you don't really see that taken off? Okay, that's helpful to know.
Thank you. I just want to chime in as somebody who that's their bread and butter. I'm married to an architect. There have been a lot of folks who bring the plan off a thing and they think they're going to save money and they don't. Partly because of the site requirements that jurisdiction has or the zoning or the whatever. So it makes it somewhat easier, but not a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Bummer. And then, yeah, I mean, we've had this conversation before, but I am interested in making sure that because the legislature has said you can go up, but you can't go down. I want to be careful not to substantially, start off at the base above what the base is today, so that we can use this table as a tool. So if the current zoning today says you can have 3 stories, I would like for it to be translated to the new EDO at 3 stories so that the table is applicable.
Thank you, but then that's what's by right, so that's what we're gonna get, right? Because this is opt-in. I mean, am I mistaken in that?
So
Like if I'm a builder and I can only, I mean, my understanding from folks is people build what they're allowed to build in the easiest path forward for the most part. So if we are making the easiest path forward what we already have on the ground, then isn't that the outcome we're gonna get?
Yeah, Councilmember Baker, can you maybe elaborate a bit on, only because like in situations like for the RD, it's not necessarily a height issue, it's a density on the lot issue. So could you maybe, because trying to,
Right now,
Take-
I'm not speaking to RD
Okay.
when I make that statement, yeah.
and yeah, we know that there are a lot of districts that are proposed for like RX5 or CX5 specifically, that currently the height is there, but the density is not. And so that's, I think that the situation there would be, we would probably, the heights wouldn't necessarily change from how what we're proposing here, but not increasing the density in some instances. And so then I think it goes back to Caballeros where are we going to allow dense apartment buildings to be constructed on our service parking lots or not by right? And so, and I'm just trying to take your direction and how it would apply and what it would look like.
But
So,
this whole table is by right.
correct. Yeah.
Every column is by right.
But yes, but if you can build to 5 stories, but you don't have the density per the calculation, trying to transfer over from today, because you're comparing from today's regulations to the way the current UDO proposes, you're right. But if you wanted us to stay with current, I think that would be limiting opportunities to develop entirely in some instances.
Okay, I appreciate that.
I think the concern is if we really want to, and remember, this is infill development. I mean, maybe even good to be looking visually at a map, like where are we talking about? This is going to be, a lot within the urban core, within our transit corridors, because, just getting back again from Portland, we have to remember there's a lot of funding that is available for transit-oriented development. And we also cannot get funding for transit unless we have the density. It's a chicken and egg thing. And if we want money for BRT projects, if we don't have the density, we don't have the ridership, we won't get the funding. So it's we also have to be thinking about this in a larger way. And so, there are different issues here around, yes, we want the affordable housing, we want to have the density because it's also going to help us with, climate change, with many other types of benefits, with reducing, provision of services, with reducing sprawl. So let's remember, how integrated all of this is. And again, just coming back from Portland, I did a tour missing middle housing, and I saw some of the things that are happening there on single family lots with density, and also a BRT line there on Division Street where they've been able to pull in funding for affordable housing around their BRT stops. But it's because they're doing the density. So anyway, just wanted to make sure we remember that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I also think that for this to work, the process of going through and having affordable units that meet this requirement needs to be so easy and seamless. And I have had I have not sort of had conversations with staff around that. I have spoken with some developers who said it was a little more challenging. So I think that we need to really dig in and make sure that option is the preferred option and is the one that is predominantly selected. And again, like I completely agree. I want density on all these sites, and I want the vision to be that this is where we want to be. If we could just go ahead and do mandatory inclusionary units, that would be fantastic. But this is the leverage that we do have. I do know that there are places that upzoned but said anything above what our old zoning regulations allowed is effectively the density bonus requirement that you have to provide. That's what they did in Alexandria. I have no idea what that would take here. So, thank you.
Chris Jacob, just to what you said a minute ago, in December, our presentation will be incorporating some information and looking for feedback on the map additionally. So that's coming. We know that the mapping of these districts is, potentially just as important as the regulations that are within them. So
For those of us who are not planners, pictures, lots of pictures. Thank you.
Thank you.
so just before moving on, we're comfortable with the incentive and the percentage requirements.
For the affordable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, looks fine to me, but at this point, any feedback on the affordable percentage?
I think when it comes to the affordable density bonus, the market is changing constantly, and we just need to be cognizant of that. I still don't love the compact, but
also the compact, I mean, looking at the pictures, right, of the compact, I think helps.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, looking at the pictures there, like,
So-
that's kind of what we're already doing with the SCAD anyway,
Yeah.
right? Expanding housing choice, right?
Yeah, since 2019, something very similar has been permitted in the urban tier. So-
Yeah, and then going to the other pictures that you had, right? So. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think we're gonna have to try this out and see what happens, and then, it's, we may have to make changes as we see what happens, right? Yeah, Sarah?
So, the whole notion behind the compact is residential real estate, all real estate, but residential real estate is priced at a per square foot basis. So if you keep the unit small, they're going to be less expensive than a larger unit. So we're ensuring some amount of smaller units that may not be, capital A, capital H affordable housing, but are going to be at other price points that are,
Yeah.
less than larger market rate
Right.
units.
Yeah.
So it's another way to
Yeah.
try and get at that. Without, one of the things that we've heard, I think Councilmember Baker, to your point about hearing some feedback about how difficult procedurally, the process that people have to go for the annual recertification of income, et cetera, that is a burden, that is difficult for people. But we need that to make sure that, those really are affordable, those units stay affordable, but that is a deterrent. So I think the compact is trying to provide another option to get at, total rents, total mortgages that might be smaller than maybe some larger units without this other burden, which I think puts a lot of people off.
I would just say also, we've seen some success with the small lot option. I mean, that's actually taken off more than ADU production. Right. So we have some evidence to suggest that it's a good tool, and we're just kind of adding more onto that tool.
Yeah, with the small lot option, we've seen hundreds of units available at a much lower price point for sale in areas that otherwise wouldn't have been affordable to those folks. Now, obviously, that's relative, right? Because some of them are $350,000 or whatever those numbers are. But otherwise, we would have had a $600,000, $700,000 single family home.
And we've seen that. I mean, recently there was just to get into the by right thing, there was some chatter, and I passed this development yesterday, and there was a lot of chat. I guess it's near Hope Valley, old, clear cut. I think there was some representation that it had been a rezoning when it wasn't. It was a by right. They're luxury homes for $700,000. So I think that we have to, again, to this kind of notion, if it's by right, it's like there's a lot that can be built by right that's not what we want. So I think that it goes back to if you make certain things flexible, and I think the small lot option is a great example of that, then we're seeing the innovation that we want from our building community. And that building community is local. It's not the large, we also hear, well, we don't want these out of town developers. Well, then you have to make the sandbox one that is friendly to smaller folks who do not have the capital to take risks. They can't they can't risk an 18-month thing because they don't have a business big enough. And so that I think that this is where we're going to get some of these smaller local builders playing, right?
And again, let's remember, this is infill. And what we're talking about, and this really stuck out with me in Portland, this idea that making neighborhoods that are the most desirable and have all the amenities, that are walkable and near some, commercial places where everyone wants to live but can't afford to live, and that's just what I saw in Portland, is that by doing the infill and this compact, you actually allow people who would never be able to afford a home in that neighborhood, who want to live in a safe place, who want to have their kids to be near the quote unquote good schools, or, walk to a store. You actually create the opportunity for them to be able to buy or rent in that neighborhood. And I think that's what we want to see. So.
All right, we'll move on. All right, recognizing that, well, let me just back up. Our current UDO has what we call infill standards. These apply urban tier residential development less than 4 acres. We're proposing to carry over those standards, or some of them, in the new UDO. The idea is that we are, we want to densify, we want to allow development and have more residential uses in these neighborhoods, just like Commissioner Jacobs said, but we also want to be sensitive to the character and the context where they are constructed. And so the two big ones we're carrying over is the street yard. And so if you are proposing a new primary structure, your street yard setback will be established by the existing street yards along that block face. So we've got an example here, but essentially the new home will have to be in line with the other homes, or the new duplex, or the new townhomes, or the new whatever it is. The other requirement is building height, right? So new primary structures are bound to be in close proximity to the height of the structures along that same block face. This is for affordable. If you're doing the affordable option, we'll let you go to the maximum for that district, which just to further encourage, we don't want to limit. If someone's going to build 4 affordable units on an existing neighborhood street, we would like to encourage that. These are very similar to what we have in our urban tier today. I will admit that they help a great deal with more context sensitive development in those situations. It is a little bit of an administrative burden, both on the applicant and the staff. So you may hear rumblings, sometimes folks will, and so that may be a cause for that. Any questions on those two infill standards?
Yeah, because some of our neighborhoods, like their front yards are huge. So that setback is a lot of land, depending on where you are. And so I understand why, but I think that there has to be that conversation of just, you see it, you see a front yard, that's what a street yard is, that could have a whole other structure, but because of the setback rule, you're not going to be able, it's not usable. So I guess that's.
Yeah, I feel like you had a bug in one of our meetings. Expressed the same concern while we were talking about this, and so we put.
I just see the neighborhoods, and every single time I drive by it, I'm like, oh, we could have a unit there, and it would be still kind of lower density, but that's what missing middle housing is. It is that what you see in Trinity Park, quite frankly. Very interesting land use where something looks like a house and it's 4 or 5 units.
Yeah, so we've got a carve out in the text that actually says, is it 30 feet? Yeah, if it's any more than 30 feet, you can go there, because we don't want to waste land in there. So that was something we tried to get at. So funny.
So if homes have the deep setback, like the big front yard,
Mhm.
but the zoning, that the infill standards don't override the zoning. So like if you're allowed to have a front yard of 10 to 15 feet, but all the houses are set way back, you can just meet the zoning. Is that right?
No, they would override.
The infill standards override.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, again, the idea being to try and, so that the development is more compatible with the character of the neighborhood.
I saw in Portland, people building ADUs in their front yards now. Yep.
All right, one other thing to note, and we talked about this several months ago, we incorporating a requirement for 7% tree coverage throughout. This is new. Well, it's not completely new. We sort of stole it from one of the neighborhood protection overlay districts. So rather than having, particular preservation standards for that neighborhood, throughout RD, we'll apply that requirement. So.
And what is the current requirement for tree coverage?
Unless you're in the NPO, it's 0.
Okay, so
Well,
this
in
is,
these particular areas, that would be RD.
so this is actually a huge increase. And I just want to know, I think I read it in your report that this is based on feedback that you heard from the community.
Yeah, I mean, and Robin, you may want to speak of this a little bit more, but just as we're trying to carry over our tree coverage requirements in different districts, not having the tiers, right? We're trying to find places, where we can have those requirements. And then I'll also note that some of these infill developments, we know that loss of trees is the first thing that folks usually see and have a concern about. So we're trying to get at that.
Yeah, I actually thought that I was presenting this slide, so that was really fun for me, actually. But I will say that, yeah, the two things that we're really trying to get at here were the tree coverage and the affordable height exemption, because what we've sort of heard repeatedly throughout the process is that, when people do want densification, they want affordability and they want trees to stay. So what we tried to do was build that into these infill standards so that when this does come through the by right process, that you have the flexibility of those different options. But the things that we keep hearing are if there's going to be more density, that it'll be affordable and that there will be trees on the lot. And that actually translates really well into the next slide. So within that, we're also working on a sustainable development matrix. This is composed of quite a few different things. It needs an array of options because we're trying to apply this across a whole range of different development types and scenarios and lots, right? But I wanted to sort of transfer over to this because it does give you actual points if you can actually retain those trees on the lot as well. So it's 7% requirement regardless, but if you retain them, then you get points towards this matrix, right? So we want to make sure that it's an incentive, but we don't want to create lots that are unbuildable.
Can you just explain what are the points go towards?
Yep. So right now it's sort of set up in which it's scaled so that RD options 2 and 3, you're required to have 3 points. And then in the non-residential and mixed use districts, at the smaller scale, you'll have 3 points. You're exempt when you're below 8,000 square feet because these are really small lots. And once you get above 50,000 square feet, you have to get 4 points. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that these match essentially the scale and cost of construction, because what we've noticed is when we provide too many regulations that exceed those things, we just get it taken away. So we're trying to be cognizant of cost and scale and still provide those things that we have heard that folks want. And so really trying to make sure that we're not only, retaining appropriate development standards, but also not creating massive increase in costs. So how do we get the things that we want, so more sustainable development, without radically increasing the price of that housing? And so we have native landscaping standards, increased conservation measures. A lot of these are things that we cannot require per state statute, but we can certainly ask that folks do it and provide them an incentive to do it. For instance, increasing riparian buffers, things of that nature. Additionally, providing a field survey when there are actually natural heritage areas and, providing a management plan. That's not something that we can require, but it's certainly something that we would love if people did, especially for large sites. So trying to get at these things that are hard for us to regulate, but still really want to see and keep hearing. And so the last are some things around building design. I think this is especially important as we start thinking about the compact options, right? I will say that we did try to, we did look at the Kannapolis example. We did try to veer away from things that could just be removed. So for instance, let's say that someone provided a bunch of Energy Star appliances. Once that's CO'd, they could just take them out. So we really wanted to, things that were easy to see. And so that if folks were driving around, zoning enforcement, et cetera, could be pretty easily called out should it be removed. Additionally, there are things around urban agriculture and stormwater, really trying to get at the things that we keep hearing, right, but trying to provide green stormwater infrastructure, which goes beyond what's required already. I've talked a little bit about the issues with requiring GSI, ongoing maintenance, state requirements for nutrient and quality and quantity, right? All these things that we keep running into. So trying to provide this as a bonus, and then also trying to throw in that educational signage, one, so that people know what it is, but two, so it makes it much harder to remove once it's CO'd. And so we're really trying to get at a few things to incentivize really sustainable development as we continue to densify, and really trying to take this from resident feedback, the comp plan, the EAB, which we haven't taken this to the EAB, but we have gotten a letter from them from some of their wish lists, and some of that is directly taken and put right in here. And then I'll also say that this is very much still in draft form. We're definitely seeking direction, even if not today. If you are driving home and you're like, man, we should put that in there, shoot us an email. But just really trying to get an idea on what are things that we can incentivize in good development practices that are sustainable and meet those goals. And additionally, one last thing is that all of this is still in draft. So not only the incentives themselves, but the point system as well. So what are things valued? How many are we requiring? All of that is very much still in draft.
Okay, this is the time for comments or
Yeah,
questions?
sorry.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, this is really great. I really appreciate what I'm seeing here is, that you all are trying to respond to the concerns that you've heard with all of the sessions at the main library, where folks have come in to engage with the UDO revision process. And I see this as really being an attempt to address the concerns in the community, where we have a tension between people want sustainable development, people want to protect the environment, people want to see trees, concern about stormwater runoff, and at the same time, people also want affordable housing. And, so these are all loud and clear, again, in the comprehensive land use plan. So appreciate you all trying to come up with a creative approach to incentivize. And again, as you said, Robin, I think a lot of times, and we all have to really work on this, but that the public wants things that we can't require, that we are not, according to the statutes in North Carolina, that we cannot require. And so this is a way, hopefully something that might work. So anyway, love to hear feedback from folks.
Yeah, no, I love the direction that this is going in. I'm very excited about this. I know Kannapolis has the the sustainable development standards and the sustainable development incentives. Can you just talk about how that works here?
Yeah, so these are just standards that I've set incentives, but truly these would be requirements. And so when I mention incentives, it's just sort of getting at that some of these we can't require. So we are sort of incentivizing them, but it is still a requirement to meet. You just don't have to meet all of them.
I love this. I love the flexibility, and hope, the desire and the hope is that we'll see variety in what folks provide. And I'm sure that, the points are so challenging to get to the right number there. And I'm sure at some point we'll notice developers gravitating to one or the other based on the points. But that's something for us to think about down the line. But I love the direction this is going in. Yeah.
Yes. Shirley.
Hey, since I've been on this committee, little bit by little bit, with my orientation as well, I'm learning more and more. And I think this is probably the most I've understood, since it takes a little while for me to, kind of read through it and understand things, but the way it's laid out here in very clear language, I want to show that appreciation. Now, there's one term that I'm getting hung up on, I just don't understand, and it's pay right. Okay, and I don't really understand that, and I was wondering if someone can explain it. And is pay right versus what?
By right.
By right, yeah.
By right.
By right. I'm sorry. See that I'm saying I don't know it.
Yeah.
Right. So by right versus whatever is not by right.
Yep.
Could someone help me understand that a little bit?
Absolutely. So by right development is anything that you can do underneath the current ordinance. So we have the UDO, and you are granted certain rights as a property owner, and we have decided those rights through the UDO. And any changes to that UDO go before the governing boards, which is you all, to make sure that that matches what you all think residents want. And so anything that is by right means that it just goes to the UDO, people can submit it. We can review the permit. You all don't need to look at it because you've said it meets the rules that we have decided work best for the community and what we've heard from residents. The opposite is going to be legislative development. So this is a rezoning, special use permits, things like that. Well, actually, those are quasi-judicial. Let's not get into it. But those are things that need extra review, or they want to do something that does not quite align with the UDO. So they can't just submit a permit and go for it. For instance, if there's a vacant lot and you want to build a house on it, absolutely, as long as it meets the UDO, that's by right development. Y'all don't have to review it. They want to put a school there, they need to talk to you.
Yeah, so it's basically every property has a zoning district, right? And you're allowed to develop following the rules for that district. So you could tear down your house today and build back another house and just follow the zoning rules. And you don't have to go get an approval by a board to do that. That's by right development. Now, if you want to, put a used car lot on your property instead, you're gonna have to get a rezoning because that's not allowed in that district. And so that's the legislative. So I just wanted to give like an example, a real life example of how that plays out.
Thank you so much. I can follow now. I get it now. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, I think this is great direction. And again, this is how it's supposed to work. We have our boards and commissions, the EAB weighing in, the community weighing in, and again, how we can achieve what is in the comprehensive plan through the UDO process. And thank you all so much for your great work.
Thank you all.
So this has been a really great meeting. And I guess one thing I just wanted to bring up is how, just to ask our board, this committee, what are some ways, and I'm sorry that Ted left because he really was going to be part of this. I feel like we need to figure out ways that we can have, And I know, you all are doing your part with the, happening at Main Library and whatever, but I feel like we need to think about what are ways that we can help have more of these conversations in the community and more ways to kind of push out what the kinds of things that we talk about here. And so to help people really bring people together with developers, with community members, and to really try to strengthen the communication and the back and forth and education and just all of that. And I'm just opening it up. What ideas, I know, just to push out, really making sure people understand what is happening with the UDO revision process. I think we need to, we're not doing a good job on that. And I just want to, just want to see what ideas people have. Yes.
So this is clearly going to affect the next generations more than it is us. So why don't we have focus groups at the schools? I mean, get the next generation involved. They're much more electronically savvy than their parents or their grandparents. It's going to affect their parents or their grandparents' land, but it's going to affect their lives. So maybe get some of them interested in the process, go to some of the schools, and then they can take the word home, and you could spread it out that way instead of just going like to the Ruritan clubs and then all the people that are already entrenched in their lifestyles say, no, no, no. Maybe if they hear it from their kids or their grandkids, hey, this is how it's going to affect me, ma or grandma or whatever. But, and then they can have those family conversations.
So what I hear from you is setting up opportunities for conversations where we're getting people together to, really talk about these issues, and of course, having some expertise. I'm not trying to put more work on you guys, so I want to be cognizant of staff capacity. I mean, it's really also on us as well, but so thank you for that.
Or I don't know if there's even like a curriculum, a class that you can put in the high schools or the grade schools or Durham Tech or something, community development or involvement. And then people could understand this process from an earlier age.
Yeah, but I hear you too, is that we need to have a way to help to educate people about this. These issues are so complex. And, I have to go to other places to conferences and things and site visits to learn about them myself. But, yeah, so any other thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, so when I joined the Planning Commission in 2018, I looked at the UDO, and after about 10 minutes, I was like, we need a new UDO. So first and foremost, I think the message should be, we need a new UDO. We need this process to succeed. And I actually spoke with a group recently. I started putting together my own presentation of this process and the UDO. And that was the first message was, this is a huge opportunity. Here's all the problems with our current UDO. And I think that's an important place to start is, here's what our current UDO is doing. And here's what it does well. And here's what it does poorly, but we have to explain that in understandable language, right? I mean, thinking about by right, and like we need to translate that into very understandable language. Here's what it does well, here's what it does poorly, here's why we need a new UDO, here's what the new UDO is doing. And then I also lay out kind of my hopes for where the new UDO will end up. So I think I think having good, productive conversations with the groups that we are involved with is one way that we up here can have good, productive conversations about the UDO with the community. That's on top of everything that the office hours, the consultant coming in and speaking. We haven't even gotten a full draft of the UDO, which would involve like a full presentation. And I think having it all consolidated and being able to say this is what it does is, even though it's so much information, I think that is going to, in some ways, help the conversation, because right now it's sort of still in these modules.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions for staff. I just first want to say, I know y'all are, working really hard to do community engagement. I also want to acknowledge that there are folks who have been very pleased with the community engagement that's happened, including from other communities where they were like, your staff's been excellent. I had questions and wanted to have an understanding around a thing. So I do want to emphasize that. I was curious between participatory budgeting voting and the community conversations on the budget for next year, if planning staff is maybe thinking about being in those spaces to also push upcoming, because we're already there, right? We already have city staff and other community events where it might make sense. And I know it's an extra lift for y'all, but I've seen engagement from the city do well when one department just kind of ponies up with another department that's already going to be out there anyway. And starting to get some of these visuals like, hey, this is what we mean when, right? And promoting some of these other module conversations and office hours and things like that, because I think that there is a lot of churn right now. And I feel like planning staff is unfairly getting the brunt of it. And I am interested in ensuring that morale stays high. Y'all are an excellent planning staff, and we need to really elevate that and really elevate the amount of community engagement you all are doing. So that's just a suggestion that I have that wouldn't maybe be that much extra work.
Yeah, I just want to say that's a great idea. I remember years ago, it's been so long, that the city and the county and Durham Public Schools all joined together to do participatory budgeting. I think that was like in my first
That was community conversations. That was in
community
2018.
conversation. Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, my second term in office. So it's kind of sad to say that it has been 7 years since we did that. But that was really great because a lot of it was people asking questions and getting clarification on things. And it was just a great opportunity. To your point, Sarah, people are sitting around at tables and staff is there to actually provide the actual information. So, piggybacking and making sure planning staff are at the participatory budgeting. So if something comes up, that's a fantastic idea. And the visuals as well. Yes.
What's the ETA for the complete draft?
I'm hitting the wrong button. Morale is low. No, just kidding. We are shooting for end of year to get a full draft from the consultant.
And calendar?
Calendar year, yes.
25.
Yes, correct. Okay. Oh gosh, not fiscal year.
So I guess one thing to think about then is, since to think about planning ahead for that to happen around when it's completed. Some situation where we can have small group conversations with the help of all our county and city staff, not just, with facilitators or whatever, an opportunity for, because we did it at the convention center. Or I don't know, something.
Three, because one was focused on city services, one was focused on county services, and one was focused on schools. So we
Right.
did the city one at the convention center, the county one at DSS, and then the school one at Brogdon.
God, you really remember. Wow. But even if this is just focused on the UDO revision, so that we can go in and have maybe some event where that type of thing
Yeah, but
happens.
we're having our community conversations on the budget, like there's one tomorrow, El Futuro.
Oh,
Right, so, and I know that's a short turnaround, but that's one of the few, I think we're doing bilingual and in a space where people feel safe, right? But I know that the engagement, and I don't remember their full title, the engagement department is doing a lot of that work, and I don't remember how many we're gonna have and things like that.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that and see what we might be able to do. We do have an in-person engagement event next week on the 13th, specifically on the UDO.
okay.
Yeah, I know some folks will be gone.
Yes, will be.
The other thing that we are working on is, we've used you all essentially as our steering committee throughout this whole project. And we're programming to come to both full boards to do a bit of an update before the public hearing process starts, early next year, just to bring up to speed the other members that are not part of this body, so they feel like they have an understanding. We are also going to be, offering some one-on-ones, particularly for those members that are not on JCCPC, if they want to get into a deeper dive and understand more. So that will be coming. We're right now trying to think through the timing and the sequencing of getting the full draft. What does engagement look like? What the timing of trying to move through the public hearing process looks like, because it is not, this is the largest project we ever do. And so it's going to take some time at Planning Commission, right? So we need to kind of plan for that. I think just in full transparency, our initial hope and dream of having this effective July 1 is not realistic, right? So we know that we're pushing that timeframe out. We're just trying to figure out what that new timeframe looks like.
Is there already a plan for community engagement come January? Or is that something that's still in the works?
That is still in the works. And so we're trying to frame it as more of like an education, because what we've done so far is really engage, or what we will be continuing to do is engage on the content in the first 3 modules, which is the most impactful. And it's the thing that folks are really wanting to hear about. And then the last sort of set is more of the technical administrative stuff that is more important for our end of the house. So trying to have sort of a engagement in the new year of like, here's what the whole draft sort of looks like, and here's what it looks like moving forward. So sort of explaining what the adoption process looks like for folks so they can come, and sort of making it really explicit that we don't imagine that this will go to like Planning Commission in March and then City Council in April, right? Like there will be time to like go to Planning Commission. I'm sure a lot of folks will come out of the woodwork and have comments, rework the draft, potentially go back, go to council, et cetera, but sort of make that process really explicit for folks so they know how to follow along.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. Are you thinking of like open house style engagement? Like with, I don't know, boards and people standing around?
Yeah, we did that in the initial for some of the first meetings where it was sort of focused around like, what do you want to hear? What do you want to see in this UDO? And it was sort of focused around transportation, the environment, and housing, which are sort of the big 3 topics. And so we could definitely do something similar, so folks can sort of, pick and choose. We've also had a lot of success with having like small groups at tables, and have folks be able to like literally just ask planning staff questions. So maybe there's some way to incorporate both of those. We've done a little bit of a few different things throughout this whole process, just because there's been so much engagement, but definitely that's something we can consider.
For the modules that have already been developed, have those continued to have little tweaks and changes to them? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one reason once there's a full, it'll be easier for everyone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think it's more the education part. I mean, we've done the engagement. We've been doing, you all have done an amazing job at the engagement. I think it's the education piece that is going to be the key. And because, we've been working on this a long time, and I'm even concerned to hear we won't even be able to get this done by July 1st. So I think maybe even could we see, is it possible for us to see a timeline at our next meeting in December?
Yeah, we can certainly rework the timeline. I will say that I am hopeful that we could get it adopted by July 1st.
That would be good.
The effective date, though, we usually build in some amount of cushion of transition or things that are in the queue to get flushed out and people just to have some certainty of the rules that they may or may not be working with. That's made a little bit easier by the permit choice statute. So I don't think we need as much transition time necessarily, but there's a lot of operational things that need to change on our end, forms and whatnot, and, making sure the mapping, is live, et cetera. So those are not things that a switch gets flipped overnight. We are going to do as much as we can in advance to be ready, but we also, from a staff standpoint, need a little bit of time of transition.
So the goal is still to adopt by next fiscal year from the boards, from the county and from the city.
I would hope so,
Okay,
but we'll.
I just wanted to make sure that that's,
Yeah.
okay. So I guess a couple of things then on I think now that we have a centralized office in the city, I think utilizing that, that was the intent of council and one of the reasons we were really supportive of that. And I think Councilmember Baker and I think we're aligned on that, was to centralize that engagement and make it easier for departments to use it as a resource. And they're really good. And so after PB and community conversations or maybe capacity, I would not want to put that on their plate now, but to think through some kind of larger conversations where folks can really, they can ask their questions, do one in Spanish, do a few leverage partnerships that we have in our schools as well, if that's what planning staff decides, and then just lean on us and other electeds to really get the word out and drive, and other mechanisms to drive attendance.
Yeah, I'll say that while their support is great, their support is mostly logistics because, we still are the ones that have to answer the questions and do the presentation. Like the subject matter experts still
Yeah, y'all are
carry
key,
carry
right.
exactly.
I'm just thinking of the lift of getting out, getting the message out, and the logistics of the thing, I think doesn't have to be planning staff. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, great. So next month you'll bring back a timeline for board's adoption by July 1st.
Yeah, by before we get a break,
Oh,
right? We go on summer break
before
in
December?
June. Yeah.
oh, you mean July 1st, 2026?
Yeah, but we adjourn in June.
Right, right.
So we're not
No.
adopting anything in July, we're adopting it in June.
Right, okay, before June, in June. In June, because, right, okay, June 2026 is, yeah, right, yes. Yes, yeah, before the new fiscal year, okay. All right, that sounds good. Okay. All right, that sounds good. All right, and what else should we expect for December meeting?
We will be talking to you a little bit about some of those administrative sections from Module 4. I shouldn't say Module 4, but for the end of the draft. And then we'll be talking to you all about plan district standards and what that sort of may look like and get some direction from you on that. And I think that's mostly it. Yeah. Oh yeah, we will talk mapping again. Yep, and we'll have some maps to show you.
And I know Councilmember Cabir has asked us before, that in the comp plan, we said that our goal was 30% protected open space. And I just don't, do we have the data on what percentage of open space is actually permanently protected right now
So
in the county?
That has been done.
So Carl did an initial analysis and presented to you all a few months ago on, there were some varying tiers of that, of whether it's an easement or owned, et cetera.
Okay.
But we are working on a countywide open space plan to do that a little bit more thoroughly as well. And that contract is currently, I think, with the attorney's office.
Okay. All right, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. this year. Oh, and maybe it was. Okay, where was that? On the floor?
It was on my